The Middle Ages were a time of knights, castles, and dazzling balls. But for many, life in this era was far from romantic. Alongside intricate dances and feasts, there were jobs that could frighten even the most daring job seeker. Grueling, filthy, and often deadly professions were an integral part of life, and those who performed them were rarely afforded respect. One such profession was that of the barber. Today, the word is associated with cozy barbershops, but in the Middle Ages, barbers also served as doctors and cosmetologists. They cut hair, administered enemas, and performed bloodletting. Their tools were often cleaned with urine, and diagnoses were sometimes made by tasting this liquid. The groom of the stool was responsible for tasks related to the use of the royal commode and ensuring the monarch's hygiene. Due to the close proximity to the king, this position carried significant risks. For example, Henry Norris, who held this role under Henry VIII, was accused of an affair with Anne Boleyn and executed. With the advancement of medicine in the late 16th century, there arose a pressing demand for corpses to study anatomy. This led to the emergence of so-called body snatchers, who exhumed bodies from graves for a fee. It is said that some went beyond theft, resorting to murder to meet the demands of their clients, ranging from young, healthy individuals to women in the early stages of pregnancy. Leech collectors were another group of unsung heroes in the medical field. Their method was simple: wade into a swamp until their legs were covered in bloods sucking worms. This occupation not only caused constant wounds but also severe dizziness due to blood loss. Equally exhausting was the work of fabric dyers. These craftsmen immersed fabrics in vats of solutions which often included urine. The stench was unbearable, but the health consequences were even worse: skin irritation and constant exposure to toxic fumes. The job of a sapper in the Middle Ages was fraught with extreme danger. Primitive explosive devices often led to accidents, and nearly half of these workers perished as a result of their own inventions. Cathedral builders, particularly those who worked in manual cranes, lived in constant danger. Their task was to rotate large wooden wheels to lift heavy stones for construction. The height, exhausting physical labor, and risk of falling made this job almost suicidal. The phrase scapegoat is not just a metaphor. It originated as an actual profession in the 15th century. Only the king could punish a prince, but he rarely took part in upbringing. Instead, royal children were assigned companions who bore the punishments for their misdeeds. It was believed that witnessing a friend's suffering would instill guilt and responsibility in the prince. The food at royal courts appeared luxurious, but its safety was ensured by food tasters. These brave individuals were the first to sample dishes to ensure they were not poisoned. The art of poisoning was highly advanced in the Middle Ages, and many tasters met a tragic end to their careers. The blacksmith in the Middle Ages was often regarded as a sorcerer, as his work involved fire and metal, symbols of the otherworldly. Metal, extracted from the depths of the earth, was seen by peasants as a gift from the underworld. The process of using fire to transform raw ore into finished tools or ornaments seemed like real magic, as if the blacksmith were altering the creator's design to reshape raw materials into instruments and decorations. The work of a plague doctor was among the most terrifying. Their patients suffered from the incurable Black Death, and the only treatments available included salves made from dung, powders from dried toads, and plucked chickens. Despite their characteristic beak-shaped masks, the doctors were defenseless against the disease. Pins in the Middle Ages were made by hand, and this task was often performed by women and children. Their small fingers made it easier to handle the painstaking process, which required patience and attention to detail. Workshops where this work took place were often left unlit, making the task even more challenging. In some cases, candles were used, but this not only increased the risk of fires, but also added to the workers' stress. Gravediggers, in turn, performed tasks that even plague doctors avoided. They transported decomposing bodies out of town, collecting them from homes. Their clothing and skin often fell victim to infections transmitted from the corpses. The work of fullers was no less revolting. To clean wool of grease, they spent hours stomping on it in vats of urine. No romance here, just hard labor and an unrelenting stench. Executioners, or masters of the axe, were not only responsible for carrying out executions, they also disposed of carcasses, cleaned streets, and culled stray animals. Despite earning decent wages, they were despised, and the executioner's son often inherited his father's trade. Night soil collectors, or gold gatherers, were true heroes of the night. They cleaned city latrines and transported waste beyond the settlements. The stench of their work stayed with them forever, and their health deteriorated due to constant exposure to toxins. From this waste, saltpeter, a key component of gunpowder essential for warfare and construction, was extracted. If someone left a mess behind, they could be placed in a barrel of waste, rolled through the city, and thrown into the river along with the barrel. Fishmongers and sellers of fish offal had to possess loud voices and a tolerance for revolting smells. Fish spoiled quickly, so they had to convincingly praise their goods across the market to sell them in time. Palanquin bearers, or carriers of portable chairs for the nobility, had another grueling but prominent profession. These strong men, often from impoverished backgrounds, spent hours carrying heavy constructions with aristocrats seated inside. They worked in all weather conditions, navigating narrow city streets and uneven roads while enduring mockery and humiliation from their passengers. Physicians' assistants, known as toad swallowers, were tasked with demonstrating the effectiveness of medical remedies. Their duties involved publicly consuming dried or treated toads, which doctors claimed could cure various ailments. Such demonstrations not only disgusted spectators but also posed serious health risks to the assistants, who faced potential poisoning or illness from these experiments. Turnspits in medieval kitchens were the lowest rank among workers. Their job was to continuously rotate the spit roasting meat, and their reward was merely the scraps left behind after the other cooks had finished their meals. Chimney sweeps were among the most dangerous professions. Narrow, soot-filled flues were cleaned by children or thin adults who crawled inside with primitive tools. The work was not only grueling but also life-threatening due to the risks of suffocation or falling. Urine tasters assisting physicians analyze patients' urine. This process involved not just observation but also tasting it. It was believed that the flavor and aroma of the liquid could accurately reveal an illness. Tooth gatherers performed a grim and shocking task. They extracted teeth from corpses or even pulled them from living people for a small fee. These teeth were then used to create dentures for wealthy clients, making the job a profitable but deeply morbid trade. Rat catchers were vital yet scorned workers in cities. Their job was to capture rats, which spread diseases and destroyed food supplies. These individuals risked their health by handling infected rodents and often suffered bites and infections. Despite the dangers, their work was considered dirty and degrading. Parchment cleaners prepared animal hides to create writing material. The hides were first stripped of meat and fat, then soaked in a lime solution to remove the hair. This process was messy and labor-intensive, and inhaling toxic fumes often led to respiratory illnesses. We hope you enjoyed our selection of the most repulsive professions of the Middle Ages. These jobs rarely became the subject of songs and legends, yet they were essential for the survival and progress of society. Subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more fascinating videos and stories from the past.